So welcome everybody to the Ripple Intent podcast. I am one of your hosts, Kyle Makrowski, and with me as always is John Grant. John, go ahead and say hi.
Hey, listener.
So for that person who's listening, I hope you are excited for our guest today. What we do here at the Ripple Intent podcast is we have conversations with some amazing people within the design and construction industry and outside of the design and construction industry as well. We are trying at Ripple Intent to help people become better people, better teammates, and better leaders. And we do that through a variety of methods, including conversations like this one today on our podcast. And with us as someone I've known now, we had to check right before we started recording to see exactly how long we've known each other, but it's going on over a decade, which is fantastic. Tim Albiani has been a good friend, a mentor to me. I've learned a lot from this guy over the years. And our paths continue to cross and intersect. And huge supporter of Ripple Intent, was one of the guys, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, but he was one of the guys that really helped push beyond the limits on a project that we did in the Pacific Northwest many years ago against many, many odds. And just awesome energy, awesome guy. And I'm really happy you're here, Tim. So please, thanks for being here. And go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit to our listener.
Well, listener, my name is Tim Albiani. I am a vice president of operations for a national construction company, McCarthy Building Companies. And I told both John and Kyle when I came on this that I've listened to a lot of the podcasts, and I just am blown away at the people that that are part of this group and that have been asked to be part of the podcast. And I guess that there's a humility level in this because I don't believe I've done all those many things that are out of the box. But at the same time, just realizing that we all have our own opportunities, and I look at this as an opportunity to talk to two friends and to talk a little bit about the industry and to get a good feeling about where we're heading. And being from California, we've been doing design build for just a real long time, and it's just a different process. And getting the partnership on board is really an exciting piece. If I step a little bit into my background, I was a farm kid. I grew up on a cattle ranch, and my parents were very gregarious people. They believed that we needed to learn how to speak and how to be involved in all the 4-H and FFA and all those things. So we went all over the Western United States, dragging cattle along and learning, leadership interface opportunities. And then when I went to college as an ag kid and went ag engineering because I was good at math. Didn't know what ag engineering was. And by the time I was halfway through college, I decided I was more focused on the civil side. So I ended up getting a civil engineering degree.
Wait, go back. What? I don't know what ag engineering is either. What is that?
Well, in California, there's 3 big schools for ag engineering. Ag engineering is actually, there's either water science, which I thought I was going to get all excited and go out and run one of the big water agencies. Water in California is gold. I mean, it is a big deal. And, I thought that was pretty cool. Where I went to UC Davis, which is a pretty prestigious research institution here. And their ag engineering was more mechanical, the mechanics of agriculture engineering. My first professor founded the eye that sorted the tomatoes type things, tomato harvesters. Those to truly be the mechanization of agriculture. And people don't know this, but in California, ag is the number 2 economy in the entire state, and that's only behind tourism. And you drive up and down the Central Valley of California, and you will understand why agriculture is so important. I had a passion for it. I kind of have a passion for most things I dive into. But when I got into school, engineering, it was just not second nature. I definitely worked for it. And the other side of life was figuring out what really gets you going. And I had a lot of mentors back then that allowed me to ask them a lot of questions. A couple of them were true engineers. Others were ag engineers. A couple were contractors. And I went with I really listened to the contractors because it just sounded more interesting to me. Long story short, I graduated. I worked for a municipality for a year. I worked for a very prestigious, great structural engineering firm in Bueller Engineers, or Bueller and Bueller back then. And then 5 years in, I had been hired by by a couple of construction firms out of college, but I turned them down to go do my engineering. And one of them just kept bugging me, when are you going to come work for me? And I decided that was going to be, now. So that we're talking would have been 1993, and I switch over into construction, and I never looked back. And what I did find, and I was fortunate enough for the firm I was with, that they grew up in the Silicon Valley. They grew up in the Bay Area. The joke with Rudolph and Slatton was that we didn't build the garage for Hewlett and Packard, but we remodeled it into a museum when asked. It goes back with that whole growth. So we were doing technology. We were doing everything fast tracked. We were doing clean rooms before people knew what clean rooms were. And, my first design build job was in 1994, a job that just needed to be built quickly. And the owner was Pacific Bell, which is AT&T. And they threw their hands up in the air and said, we need this immediately. And 9 months later, we had turned over a network operations center. And the way that we did it was through, I would say, a rudimentary design build. It was really just a collaborative effort of everybody on the team going and focusing on the outcome. Since then, design build has it's gone into IFOAs, and it goes into integrated integrated form of basically how we deliver projects in a shared environment. The next thing about that is that it just seems like that's where I have been, and I've been fortunate enough. I switched companies, been 12 years now, over to McCarthy Building Companies. And that was more because I wanted to be, I like a business that is it's owned locally, owned by the partners. While McCarthy is a national company, it is 100% ESOP. So it means that we're all invested in a solution. And that's kind of how I like things. I like the world where the owners, the architects, the contractors, the subconsultants, the trade partners, they're all invested in a shared winning and a shared outcome. And if we can do more of that, we're going to see our industry continue to, I'm going to say, get sophisticated, but at the same time, we're going to have better projects. The true definition, which is overused, is the win-win. If you have that many people in the room, it's 5 or 6 wins, and that really changes the way people look at each other and the partnerships that are developed and how things go from that point. So that's my background. I talked a little bit about Kyle and my relationship going back, but we can do that in a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. You're absolutely right. And that's probably why when you're talking about the partnership aspect of things, the shared wins, we are actually working together. That has never been the norm within, quite frankly, most industries. It's always been an us versus them, and someone wins, someone loses. And I remember when I first met you, it was, how are we going to get all of these different people to align, to work together towards the same goal and not win at the expense of somebody else?
Right.
So that was super intriguing. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, John.
No, that's just fascinating, right? I mean, that's not the traditional mindset. Right? As we get on a project basis, you get all these different companies coming together, and it's usually, people focus on their pie wedge. I do my pie wedge, and I got to make sure it's a win for me because I got this pressure from my company. So I love it because I share the same mindset as you. Like, how do we make sure we take care of everybody in this whole process and, make it a success for the client, the owner in the end? I love it. And it's still, unfortunately, I think it's still a little atypical. More people are heading this direction, but, honestly, even I just got to say, like, Tim, I don't have the length of relationship that Kyle and you have, but even from when I first met you, the passion that you have for, taking care of people, you can't hold it in. It just shows up. And it's a totally magnetic part of you that drew me in. I mean, I love it.
I gotta know that. Have you always been that way, or was it cultivated? Like, something to do with your FFA and 4-H experiences? I mean, did you like all the animals are going to succeed, and that just translated over into project work, or what?
Is this why you could talk to the wall all day long, because you were talking to cows and pigs all day long?
No, it's a little simpler than that, and part of it, I believe, is I'm good old fashioned an Italian boy met an Irish girl at a Catholic dance a long time ago, and ergo they had 5 kids in 7 years, and I'm the fourth. And to be completely honest, I am probably, and many people have confirmed this, the quietest of the five. It is a gregarious group, a very tight knit. And we just didn't have a lot of taboo in our house. We talked about whatever we talked about at the dinner table, and we were very much encouraged to. I think you're born introverted or extrovert. I think you can work your way towards the middle column of a Myers-Briggs or something to allow yourself to be kind of on the border. But for the most part, people are born one way or the other. I was somewhat extroverted. I would tell you I was a shy kid. I'm still a bit of a shy kid, believe it or not. I have to go to a company, an industry function. I might sit in my car for 3 or 4 minutes to psych myself up to get out and go, do my job, work the room. And there's nothing, you just need to figure yourself out. And so when you talk about where does something like this come from, what you see is not always what you get, or what's behind the curtain. I have my frailties, my insecurities, just like everybody else does. But the idea is accept the ones that really work for you, and work on the ones that change. That change will make a huge difference to those you work with. My passion has been both perceived as an exceptional level of energy in a room, and it bonds people together, or it can be looked at as, way overbearing, and, hey, we all need to relate into this outcome also. And you find that balance. So, in a team meeting, it's like how you work with people. You have to assess who you are first. You have to test the waters in meetings when you're talking to people. Do they want the magnetism? Do they want the energy? Or is this a room that they're more passive, more intellectual? You got to use you can use your IQ every day. You got to use your EQ every day too. Your intelligence is one thing. Your emotional intelligence is another piece. And so, there are times when you have a lot of energy, and you'll watch someone walk in the room, and the energy will change in the room, both good sometimes, and there's people that drag it out of you. They suck the energy out of the room, and you got to watch that, because as we're doing these collaborative projects, as we're putting things together, everyone needs to be cognizant of their strengths. And more importantly, or equally as important, is what do you bring to a room that can change the tone and make it not as successful of a meeting, or as successful of a planning group, or whatever the intent of the meeting is. So what sometimes is looked at as something that draws people in, it can equally be as much something that puts people building a bit of a wall. So where it comes from, I think it's all in, you're born with certain aspects. You got to live with them. You're not going to change some of the components of your jobs. And going through any professional coaching, you kind of learn that. But there are elements of how you cope that changes the way that you're perceived in a room. And truth be told, I just made the joke earlier, I'm 57 years old. I've been doing this a long time, but the real emphasis on emotional intelligence probably has been the last 7 or 8 years. And I really look forward to seeing some of these younger people get these exposures to a high EQ earlier in their career, so that they're understanding both what they bring as opportunities, and how some of those personality traits that are opportunistic can be, need to be muffled at certain times to bring the entire team along. So there's a balance to be had there. So I appreciate the energy statement. But at the same time, you've got to also be aware of what your surroundings are.
Sure. That self-awareness is super important. And something that's an ongoing, lifelong learning journey. We've talked about that before here on this podcast, where how important and even just taking the first step on the self-awareness piece can be a huge step for no matter where you are in your career. If you're just starting, if you're halfway through, if you're towards the end, it still makes a huge difference, because it's not just in your career; it applies everywhere in life. But I'm still, it's I don't know if you answered the question. I'm still wondering, like,
It's
were you
buried in
born
me,
this
Kyle.
way? Were you born with
I was
just
born with a certain level of energy, and I was
no, not the energy
there's
piece, the taking care of everybody. I mean, wanting everyone to truly collaborate and succeed. Is that an ethical
mommy
thing?
daddy
Is it a
issues.
moral thing?
There's a lot of those things. I'll tell you, they do come from any. I'm the fourth of five. I was always the one that, when somebody wasn't having a good day, they would put me in the front of everybody and go in and make it all right. In high school, I was, that kid that I could be on the various sports teams, but I also was, involved in student council. It was stretch yourself. And I think with a lot of that, you learn your organizational skills early, and you also learn how to communicate in a fashion that I can't get all this stuff done, so we need to do it as a team. And when you start building teams when you're young, you go into college. I could do my problem sets. That was fine, but I prefer to do things in group discussions. And it just keeps building upon itself, Kyle and John. The and you need to embrace, again, what is your strength. If you're equally as important and as strong if you're a quiet person that likes to sit in the corner and grind out solutions to problems. It makes it a little more burdensome for you when you walk into a room and it's sticky notes and whiteboards and people, we have writable walls in our office because everything's a whiteboard now. And you just, what can be, we just need to make sure as the leader and that person, like I might have grown into, to answer the question, you're born with it, but you absolutely foster the other pieces that go along with it. And, I've got things that just go like anybody else that you can trace back to, being 5 years old and some of the situations you're put in. And, I was always the guy that brought everybody together. And I turned that kind of into who I am. And then you say, is it moralistic? It is kind of moralistic. It's not, I wouldn't say it's the religious side of morals. It's doing the right thing for the people. It's part of being a human. Why does work have to be miserable? Why are contractors looked at the same level as used car salesmen? People roll their eyes. I've always been very proud of what I do. Some of the projects I've completed, I've completed under my tutelage. I couldn't, people go and, oh my gosh, what an amazing place. And I get to smile later and tell them, I built that, or my team built that. And those are the jobs and that you've got to have the people that are really head down workers. You've got to have the people that are great at planning. And then you've got to have the people that bring the big picture together. And if you're missing one of those components or too heavily weighted in another, in too many grinders, you're gonna hit some friction in the processes. And, part of that comes from, each person understanding their own strengths. And you as strength finders, I know is a big deal with you. And I'm a huge fan, and I've taken it probably 4 times now. And, number 1 on my list every single time is the term relator. And because I can pretty much get inside somebody else's head to understand what are they looking for? How can I help them win? So that if we're focused on winning and they're winning and the architect comes on board and we can find out what works for them, it all works out. So somewhere in my personality profile, Kyle, it says relator. And I think it was there when I was 5 years old.
That's so cool. I mean, just hearing what you're sharing, the early life experiences that you had that reinforce that when you do approach it as a group and we all are going to succeed, that just reinforced itself so many different times before you even entered any industry whatsoever. And it just became so ingrained that it has become a core component, I think, of your belief system.
I often am told I can be a little, not really self-righteous, because I'm also told that rarely do my solutions or my impassioned pleas have to do with anything that benefits me personally. It's always about what can we do better and how can we solve this problem better. And it's funny that there is that true deep belief in that we can, if we just get over ourselves and we stop, maybe we have to have an interpreter in the room, because contractors speak one language, architects speak another language, owners are, some of them are they speak three different languages, because some of them are focused on heads in beds, or first patient, or whatever the focus may be. Some are worried about the money. Some are worried, we've got the what is it doing to our safety performance and our protocol. So you have to find that out. And I'll tell you, Kyle, when we worked together at Night Cancer Research for OHSU, which we were talking about before, we started in 2014. Building that, why are we all here? That shared goal. Getting the statement on the wall of what, it can be a grand. Up there it was, we were going to cure cancer. We're building the building that's going to cure cancer. And getting that buy-in up and down as every person came onto the job. We went through the same onboarding procedures, and you get people so that their focus is all in the same direction. Then taking success factors or other personality components and letting people realize where they fit into the systems. Equally as important, letting other people who are communicating with those people understand the type of person you're talking to, because we all have to adapt in each environment and to get the best out of everybody we've got on these large teams. We're now building a project here in Sacramento. It's a $2.4 billion hospital. Well, McCarthy as a company had never done a job that big. And, the bonding companies had never bonded a job that big. And I mean, it was a big deal. And, but putting the right teams together, figuring out, spending a lot of money on the front end. When I say money, that's not fair. A lot of time, focus, energy, coaching on the front end to be able to deliver, to get a team working together, have everyone understand their roles, and then leverage personalities to bring the full team. And I call it about diversity. People use diversity in many ways. Diversity of thought is an equation that I believe diversity does bring more to a table. The more diverse your group can be. Yes, ethnicity, life choices, other things put people in different mindsets, but so is the way you were reared. So is the way that you're wound. And to have diversity in a functional team or a component of a project really does bring extended value. And you really want to make sure you don't have 7 ENTJs in a room, and you've got one introverted, sensitive, you're going to leave people out, and you've got to bring people in. So
going back to tying that into the relator piece too, Tim, how does that actually work for you? Are you intuiting other people's strengths and what they need? Are you having conversations with them and getting them to share those kinds of things? I'm trying to figure out how are you wired, and how natural is this? Or is it your gregariousness that, it just naturally pulls it out of them? How does that work?
Good question. I have really never been asked that, so it's gotten me thinking here for a second. But I will tell you that I've been most recently I've been dealing with they put me through a program. This program it's within McCarthy over a year process. They put a professional coach or a business coach with you, and they do some personality profiles and a few other things. And um, you know, this is somewhat inherent in me. I am, as he says, you're playing chess, and with people that want to go one more. They're one move ahead, and they're trying to get to the next move. And my biggest problem is I can sometimes I'm playing chess in my head, so I'm 3 moves ahead in where things are going, and in our business, which I think you'll both appreciate, oftentimes the move isn't as obvious as you might put it in your own head as. And so the next move or whatever the decision is going to be made. And so that can get you in trouble of being too far ahead in the conversation, because when something turns left instead of goes right, you're ended up spending time disassociated trying to get back into, well, wait a minute, that wasn't what I was planning for. And your brain starts to plan. I do have a bit of an, my old partner at my previous firm said I had a sixth sense of just being able to judge people pretty quickly and being 99% right. It's not that I'm judging them for, or is they going to be a good partner, or it's more what is in it for them. The other thing I've learned, John, and as I've aged, I've gotten more comfortable with it, is just sitting down and asking people, what does success look like for you? How does success, not your firm or what would imply success to you? And then we go to the next step. And so now let's group my owner group together. What is success to you as your organization? And then, you do this in small pieces, but you start individually. And truth be told, people aren't comfortable answering that question very quickly. So sometimes you have to ask that question again later. Once, Cal knows this. I'm a big Lencioni guy. I've got the trust triangle on my wall, and I look at it often. Building that foundation of trust, it breaks down a lot of the wait a minute, what's in it for you type worry. That if I give away my secrets, are you going to give away yours? Are you going to, are we going to find that balance point? And that's where trust opens that door. And John, so 2 things. I do trust my instincts to a degree, but I'm cautious of them. And then I use those things, I write them down so I don't screw something up. And I sit down in a meeting with bullet points and I ask them. And I don't tell them what I think is going on or I think they're going to say. I leave blanks between my bullets and I write in the answer. And then I feel like, sometimes we end up having to do a 5 why on, because they're not the statement they make. Well, I want to be on budget under, wait a minute, you want this job to be on budget, under cost, turned over early. Why do you want that? Is that really? And then you get down to it and you find out that they said all these things that the corporation tells them they're supposed to say, but what they really want is they want a partnership with people they can trust, who are going to work in a way that that makes them want to come to work every day in an industry that they actually love, but they're getting burned out on because, there's too much friction at all times. So how can we eliminate the friction? Well, that's a completely different statement than a job that's under budget early and, and wins a design award. Those are neat things that corporations may look for, but finding out what drives the person is a huge piece of the puzzle. And that's what really excites me when we're starting, when the good old, the storming part of projects before you get into the norming. When you're storming, that's pretty exciting that you're getting people to get the most out of themselves and really build themselves into, and that team into something that is a high functioning partnership. And it takes time, but the outcome is worth it. But it also takes a person that is somewhat dedicated to making some of those things happen. And that really means that they have to be a trusted partner across the board. So you've got to be vulnerable as well as being inquisitive. And you have to give a few things away for others to realize that you're willing to share deep if they're willing to share deep. And I tell you, you do a lot better things more often with someone you trust and you feel aligned with than you do with someone you don't. And that's the simplest of equations, that you just have to dive deep and be able to tell people a few things that you hold near and dear, so that they can come clean too also, and bring that part of them to the table.
It's got to be an awesome way to build trust with people. I can see how easy it would be, or more mechanical, to answer the question about success for the company that you work for, the firm that you represent. There's typically an easy answer. We want to make money, we want to succeed, we want to have high retention, we want everyone to be happy, blah, blah, blah. But the way that you turn that around to go, let's not talk about the company, let's actually talk about you as a person. And let's start there. What does success mean to you? Talk about, I don't even know how I would answer that question. Right now, today, I would have to go into all my thinking strengths and be like, I'll get back to you. I need to process this for a while. And that's actually a really difficult question for a lot of people. I mean, when you get past the surface of, I want to be popular, I want to have money, I want to have a car, that kind of stuff. When you get past that and you actually move toward, okay, so there's material stuff. Let's take it one step further. What else? And I imagine that's what you're driving for, is trying to pull out of them, get them to become self-aware of, if I do X, Y, Z, then I will feel this, and therefore it will fulfill me, and I will declare success. And that's pretty powerful if you can get people to identify that. And I love how you talk about it, because you're just like, well, isn't everyone having this conversation? Because it's so important, it's so valuable, and everyone should be having it. So why don't they?
Again, as a corporate coach, he says, "Oh, like how you could have you." He says, "You literally are a bit naive, because I don't understand why you wouldn't." And you hit the head of the nail there. But at the same time, as you age, you start realizing that there's that it's natural to have defenses. It's natural. A lot of people have been burned by being a little too open, and how are you going to protect me? And I don't have that answer typically. My only thing is that we're all out there on the island together. And so it's, protect you. I don't think anybody out here is going to be coming after you. The thing we can do, we can build a shelter out of, 700 coconuts, that's all we've got to do, but we've got to use everyone's mind to do it. And we've got to trust that, that someone's not going to, be counterintuitive. They're going to go the different directions. Will I tell you that there are people at times on especially larger jobs, smaller jobs, equally as important, that culturally just don't fit? They're not comfortable. I mean, we had it at OHSU, where people just didn't enjoy being in a colo with a contractor. And they were, if you're a designer, many sub-designers also, why am I here? Others did not even know they could ask some of the questions my example would be our interior, design architect wanting to put soffits in place and sitting with a framer while they're in conceptual design, laying out ideas for how you can build soffits more economically. And her mind was blown, but she was one of the most resistant people to the whole concept of having interface with the contractor. What are they going to bring to me? Well, now she is, she's very well known in the Portland region as somebody who has embraced, an integrated project delivery model. And, there are, it's the old converts. You can see why, you had 12 disciples. Jesus had 12 disciples going around and showing people what was going on. And next thing you knew, you had 100, then you had 1,000, because people, when they see things that they truly believe in and they see progress, why wouldn't you get on board? It would be a travesty to be left on the side of the road. And what's also neat is when people start getting in the bus, other people want to get on the bus. So they start asking some of the people that are early converts, what did you do? And they finally said, I let down my inhibitions and I believed, I leaned in. I use the word leaned in way too much, by the way. So if I use it too many times here, is that they chose to lean in. and lean forward and buy in. And when they do that, oh, I mean, it's magical. It is, and you start watching, and some of the people that were the biggest pushers in the opposite direction are some of the ones that have the torch held the highest as the project goes along. There was a person up at OHSU that, I mean, I pushed pretty hard there in the middle when we're trying to go from, forming to storming to norming. We were still forming, and at the end of the job, this person came and told me that the only thing that they wish they would have done is for me to push harder earlier. And I kind of laughed because there was a time there that they weren't sure they wanted me anywhere near that job because, I was a bit of a, you think the energy can also be perceived as a little bit of a bully. And it wasn't me bullying. It was me trying to gain that trust. But, it was more difficult and took longer than I had hoped it would. And ultimately, once it was done, I mean, Kyle changed in a city's way they look at things, and I am so proud to have been underneath his vision. And the outcome is another. I don't say that California is definitely leads a lot of the design build, but we're seeing it everywhere and on non-federal projects, non-municipal projects, and now this new progressive design build where it is really about partnering and giving the owner exactly what they want instead of a programmatic idea. There's so much greatness coming along, but we have to go into it trusting, and that's why these RFPs being as really about the team and the experience and really what you're going to get as an owner when you buy this progressive design build out partnership. You are really buying the people, and that's the excitement. That's where the mojo is. And I think we're at the last or the next phase. I'm sure there'll be some other process, but to buy something with, as Kyle did, with some square boxes, the plan was on a napkin for our new Cancer Research Institute, and by the time 6 months had cooked, we had a very early conceptual design, but it wasn't that different than the block diagrams we started with day one. But what was inside of it and what the outside looked like and how the budget was ran and can we make it on schedule, start building certainties in early, and the success is almost predetermined. And that's what I see the future being. But it takes partnerships, it takes trust, and it takes alignment of people. And sometimes it takes someone that for a short period of time might be considered a bit of a bully. But the bully is more into, when they say we can't, you come back with either yes we can or why not. And people don't want to always explain why when they say they can't. A lot of times it's pre-wired to say I can't, instead of I don't know what the next move is, so then we're going to just say we don't. And if we can all work together to figure out what the next move is, maybe it's a sideward step and all of a sudden we see runway and we're able to take off forward again. Those are really big moments on some of these projects, and having somebody feel comfortable enough to push people outside the current swim lane and get them in the next door swim lane to see, is there more opportunity over here? That courage can get you in trouble, or but at the end result, and again, I'm going to go back to Kyle, he pushed some things into a different swim lane, and then he, when he went to Colorado, he was able to really start developing that in his own right, with people knew what he could do and what he wanted to do. And it's just been exciting to watch when, he talks about my energy. I look at people like him or you, John, where you've went someplace bringing your vision with you. And you had to be that catalyst for change. You had to, because it's inherent in each of you to believe in the process as much as believing in the people.
I just can't wait to that day where everyone sees the world the way I do, because it'll make life a lot easier. But
wait, a lot easier for you or the rest of us?
Both. Oh, that's already easy for me. I'm
He's
just waiting
right.
for everyone else to
He's
catch up.
right.
No, it's funny when I listen to your story.
He says things sometimes that blow my mind, and I sit there and think, well, why? How does he so damn smart? And and I just smile and I enjoy it. And that's, you know what, you can be 57 years old, and if you aren't learning every day, and you aren't ruffling a few feathers in the process of trying, some days I go home and my wife asks me, how was your day today? I don't know, it was kind of boring, and nothing really happened. And others would tell me, my God, what a great day it was, and we had these fantastic meetings and other things. And I'll sit there and think, well, it was pretty status quo. And not that status quo is bad, but I look at people like you, John, and Kyle, and you're always challenging status quo. And that is where I encourage people. That's where genius comes from. That's where communal genius is, and that's what great jobs are brought from communal genius. And that's the exciting part of this business.
So what I think is a great way for us to wrap up today, when you're describing when we started that project, Tim, how one person was really struggling and used the word bully, I would say that you've wizened over the years, but I don't think that's true, because even though you use the term bully, I think the terms that come to mind and what I've heard you describe for this entire conversation, your conviction, your belief, your stubbornness, your steadfast. I mean, you absolutely, and it's rooted back in the way you were brought up, and it's just who you are. And I think that's one of the most impressive things that is about you, is you, without a doubt, absolutely 100% convey the message that we can all succeed, and we should, and we will. And that's never going to change. And I hope it never does, because there's whoever could change that would be a fantastic guest on this show, because it ain't going to happen. So thank you so much for spending so much time with us today and sharing your insights and your thoughts and perspectives. It's been a heck of a conversation, and I really, really appreciate it and look forward to where we all end up going. With that, John, you want to close this out, or you want me to close this out? You want to
only
right.
because I can see you. That helps me to close it a little bit better.
If you want to, I can do it. I don't care.
So for our listener out there, right, connect with us. So you can find us all on LinkedIn. Kyle, Tim, and myself. You get involved with Ripple Intent. So visit the website, rippleintent.org. We host events in towns and cities all over the country. And we'd love to have you come join us. But I think, to Tim's point, the biggest thing is to engage in the conversation. And with that, please join us for the next episode of the podcast, and we'll see you then.
We will see you then.